Hi everybody and welcome to Book Blast June. I'm Nikki Gamble, I'm director of Just Imagine, and in the next 45 minutes or so I'm going to introduce some of my favourite titles that are publishing in June this year. If you're actually watching this on Facebook or YouTube Live, you can use the chat. I can view what you're writing in the chat and so can everybody else. So just as you would do if we were holding this on Zoom, please do feel free to use the chat facility. Unfortunately, you can't do that, I think, if you're watching on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So for those of you that haven't attended a book blast before, it really is a whiz through quite a lot of these great new titles. And it has been another bumper month with 1,400 new books publishing, which of course I always say I haven't read all of them. So this is simply my selection from the books that I have read. Anyway, let's crack on. Oh, and as always, for those of you joining us for the first time, at the end I will be asking some questions and you'll be invited to email in your answers to those. And there's an opportunity to win all of the books that are mentioned in tonight's presentation. Plus, we've got some absolutely fabulous rung-up prizes. In fact, last month we gave away over £1,000 worth of books. So it's well worth sending in your replies. So let's crack on because we've got a lot to get through this evening. I'm going to start with picture books, which is what we usually do. I've organised the presentation into chapters so that if you're watching this as a recorded video, you'll be able to hook into the bits that interest you most rather than necessarily sitting through the whole presentation. And chapter 1 is all about new picture books. So I'm starting with the fabulous Jackie Morris and James Mayhew's new book in the Mrs. Noah series, Mrs. Noah's Song. I'm sure you probably know the other two books, Mrs. Noah's Pockets and Mrs. Noah's Garden. This is a most moving book from Jackie and James. In this particular episode, Mrs. Noah is singing songs that she remembers that her mother had sung to her. And it's a very bittersweet story. One of her children notices that she's crying and asks why she's crying. And of course, they're both tears of happiness and tears of remembrance. She then takes her children out into the night garden, that magical time which James has captured so wonderfully in these illustrations, which you can see from the illustration that is on your slide now. And I just think these books go from strength to strength. They would make a wonderful children's opera, I think. Anyway, heartily recommend. You'll notice that on some of the screens, let me just hook back a moment, where I put the purple icon, it does mean that there's a podcast related to this book, which you can find by searching for In the Reading Corner with the title of the book. This one isn't up yet, it's in the process of being edited, but should be up very soon. And also, don't forget that you can join us if you're watching this live, you can join me with Jackie and James tomorrow evening, where we will be treated to an evening of reading, of music and of live art. And if you've attended one of Jackie and James's book launches before, you'll know that they're well worth joining in. So again, if you want to search on Eventbrite for Mrs. Noah's Songs or Jackie Morris and James Mayhew, you'll be able to reserve your place. It's a free event. So on to the next book now. And that is a new book by the O'Hearn sisters. Once Upon a Fairy Tale is very similar to the You Choose series from that's illustrated by Nick Sharratt. Once Upon a Fairy Tale invites you essentially to create your own fairy tale from some key choices that are made in the story. There is a narrative to it, so it moves backwards and forwards between the narrative and the choice making. So let me just share with you a couple of slides to explain what I mean. So here we have one of the narrative double page spreads, and you can see that we've got a hero here with a red coat, but we don't see the face of the hero, so we don't know what gender the hero is, we don't know what ethnicity the hero is. You are invited really to use your imagination to create your own hero. And here are some of the internal spreads. As you can see on this slide, some of the choices that you could make. So in a land ruled by a wise, kind queen, there was a well-dressed puss, a jolly woodcutter's son, a gentle knight, a clever princess, a mighty witch, and so on. You can choose which of those characters you want to take forward in your story. So I'm sure you'll see lots of potential for that one, and story making and storytelling in the classroom. On to a wonderful story by Bob Graham. It's a very sweet story, this one, about a young girl who finds a baby dragon, a dragon that only she and some of her young friends can see. To the adults, the dragon does not exist. So Ellie and her dragon grow older together, but as she enters later childhood, the dragon becomes less present. You can see the sort of wings on the dragon as they're in the bottom spread on this slide, going or turning a little bit translucent. And then eventually there's just a faint smell of familiar smoke as she enters her teenage years. Fortunately, there's another young child ready to discover the dragon as Ellie leaves him behind. One of the most poignant images in this is a scene in the supermarket, which repeats at the beginning and at the end of the story. And it shows the adults going about their busy lives, too busy to notice the potential for the potential of the dragons that are around them. Bob Graham does this kind of story so well, and there's a real tenderness, I think, in the way that he draws child characters. And another favourite picture book maker of mine, Debbie Gliori. This one is a heartwarming lost toy story, so in the vein of Dogger. It's a celebration of well-loved toys that take on the spirit of their owners. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I do think there's something magical about a toy that has been pre-owned, and somehow it manages to keep the, I don't know, the kind of spirit of the previous owner within it. I was really lucky to inherit some of my mum's really well-loved toys. Not the most pretty things to look at, but somehow there was that magic connection. Moonimal, which is this toy here, is found in a second-hand shop. But the boy that takes him home loses him in the woods one day, and his glasses that he's wearing there get broken and he can't actually find him. So it's all about Moonimal's adventure. The story is from the toy's point of view, and eventually he finds his way back to his beloved boy, but a lot of time has passed and the boy now has a daughter of his own, so clearly this toy is going to be passed on and loved once again. So Grandpa Jazz, this is a very gentle story about a mixed heritage family. There are a couple of books in tonight's presentation that have relationships between grandparents and children. Frank loves his grandpa because he's always telling him stories, and as Frank's mum says, some of them are true and some of them are not. As Grandpa Jazz prepares to visit Trinidad, the country of his birth, he tells Frank about some of the precious objects that he's kept, and about his journey to England on the Empire Windrush. There's a lovely twist at the end when Frank discovers that he's going to be travelling with his grandpa, and there's a chance for him to make some stories of his own. So let's just have a look at a couple of the spreads inside this book. Here we can see Grandpa Frank getting ready. He's packing his suitcase, and Frank notices some objects in the suitcase. Each of the objects that he finds, Grandpa Frank tells him a story about it. There's a piece of volcanic rock, for instance, and that becomes a story in the book. And here we have the plane that we can see as the two of them are on their way to Trinidad. And there might even be an extinct volcano in the background there. Still on picture books, there are quite a lot of picture books that I really loved this month. Mr. Boo, which is by Joyce Dunbar and Petter Horacek, is going into paperback this month. You may have seen the hardback already. And there's just something wonderful about how Joyce and Petter have both captured the wonderful catness of Mr. Boo. When Rosie gets a new kitten, she calls him Mr. Boo because he's always jumping out and scaring things. And in fact, through the beginning of this story, he's always jumping up and scaring birds, scaring butterflies. He loves the spring because there's so much flapping and fluttering and things to be scared. And you can see from the text on the screen there how Joyce Dunbar really captures that cattish movement, the swish of the tail, the crouch, the stretch, the looming of the face, the glittering eyes, the twitching nose, and the bristling whiskers. But as the years roll by, Mr. Boo sleeps longer and longer until one year when he wakes to find that spring has started without him. It's a story in which affection for cats from kitten to old age literally shines through the pages, and it will surely speak to all cat owners, as well as being a reflection on the natural aging process. Roy Moss recently wrote an excellent blog about cats in children's books, which you can find on the Just Imagine website, and I'll just put the address up there in case you want to have a look at that blog. It's worth a read, and there are plenty of suggestions of classic and new cat stories. I should just tell you that at the end of Mr. Boo, it's quite sweet. Look, here we have, let's just have a quick look. There we have him in the spring. He's a sort of young cat enjoying scaring the birds. And then you can see sort of getting a bit shaggy and a bit elderly looking. But Rosie's got a new kitten to keep him on his toes. So there we are. That's that wonderful book. Oh my goodness me. Just while we're talking about wonderful animal books, on to Catherine Rayner, who's so good at this. The very first time I saw Augustus and His Smile, which was her debut picture book around 10 years ago, I think, my heart really melted for the way that she draws animals. Another one I absolutely loved was Posy, which is written by Linda Newbury, illustrated by Catherine Rayner. And most recently, I included My Pet Goldfish. I mean, how anybody could make goldfish so lovable, but she really does. I included that in Book Blast a couple of months ago. Now we have 5 bears, and this really made my heart melt, this book. And it was down to the quality, I think, of the illustration and the drawing and the distinctiveness of the 5 bears in this story. You can see them all in their glory on the front cover here. So the story is a story about friendship, and it's how one bear meets another bear. They're a little bit suspicious of each other. and not a lot happens. They sort of go on their journey, one bear following the other, and then they meet a second bear. So there are three of them now, and then a fourth bear, the big brown bear, a little bit scary. And eventually they come across the polar bear, who is stuck up a tree. And the four bears manage to get the polar bear down, and we see them looking at each other perhaps a little suspiciously, but they all go off into the future together, and they become best of friends. Just really beautifully executed, and a story to make your heart glad, and we certainly need a lot of that. I'm sticking with animals for a moment, this time, well, a very different kind of animal story from Sharon Renter. What we have here is a blend of animal fantasy and space fact, and it works so well for young children in this engaging story. Stella the squirrel wants to go to space school, and it looks as though her dream has come true when she's accepted. Things get even better when astronaut Koala shrinks his spacesuit in the wash. So Stella, being the smallest animal, is given the chance to join the space mission to the moon. The rocket, the lunar module, and the footprints in the moon dust are all recognisable from the Apollo mission. And there's some end matter to share with the children about famous figures in the race for space. Sharon Renter is so good at creating these appealing anthropomorphized animal characters, and it will definitely have lots of appeal in the early years. If you keep walking over the hills and across the fields, you will come to the edge where the land meets the sea. And on this edge lies a village. This is my home. A young boy watches the grown-ups in his village go about their work. Everyone is busy, the blacksmith, the boat builder, the baker, but most important of all, he thinks are the fishermen who bring in the catch. Now the boy's father is a baker, but the boy wants to be a fisherman when he grows up. He wants to brave the stormy seas. And he asks his father, have you ever been to sea? This is a really atmospheric book in these wonderful pencil drawings. It's a look at a traditional way of life, and it has a timelessness to it. And I think it sits very well alongside Town is by the Sea by Joanna Schwartz and Sydney Smith, although they are very different stories, but would make an interesting comparison about traditions and seaside life. Now we're sticking with seasides because we're on to the next book, which is Kevin Henk's. And this is about a young girl. As I said, grandparents are pretty strong in this evening's presentation. It's about a young girl who visits her grandparents' home by the sea, and they search for shells that are washed up on the beach, and her grandmother tells her that they are little houses, and she muses about what else lives under the deep, deep ocean. What does a pelican think of a sandpiper, she wonders. Has a snowy egret ever seen the snow? How can the ocean be blue and grey and silver and black all at the same time? So many questions, and one day this little girl may know the answers to some of its mysteries. But for now, she'll take home a little house to her own house and keep on asking those questions. This is a book that opens up the possibilities for discussion and invites adults to share with their children their own questions, and obviously to encourage children to ask questions too. So, A Day for Sandcastles. Not only are grandparents on the menu this evening, but there's lots about the seaside, not surprisingly, because we're coming up to the summer holidays and all those seaside books are coming out. This one, A Day for Sandcastles by Canadian poet John Arno Lawson, is illustrated by Chin Lang, and it's a wordless book which is inspired by a personal story. You may recall that John Arno Lawson was the author of Footpath Flowers or Sidewalk Flowers, illustrated by Sydney Smith. That story was also inspired by a personal recollection. So this is all about John Arno Lawson remembering a day at the beach with his children and their resilience to build a sandcastle, even though they built it close to the waves where it was going to get destroyed and all the other mishaps on the beach. And yet they're persistent and resilient and they want to build the best sandcastle ever. So we'll have a quick look at some of the internal spreads and you can see some of the problems that they encounter. Here's one where a lady's hat blows off in the wind and squashes the sandcastle. It's destroyed again, and this probably is one of my favourites. This is where they have gone off to search for things to decorate their finished castle. It's just magnificent, and they want to put on the final touches, you know, some seaweed and twigs and pebbles and driftwood. And as they return to the castle, that moment as they just see the baby walking towards it, and oh no, it's unavoidable. It's a great wordless storybook. Quite a lot of picture books this month, probably the biggest section. I absolutely love this story, The Upside Down Detective Agency. This one works really well as a picture book for older readers. So first of all, meet Stella and Stan. They are crime busting buddies and they look really alike. Only the smartest sleuths can tell them apart, so why don't you give it a go? So here's a hint. Stella loves long walks and climbing trees. Stan loves painting, and this morning he met a puppy with muddy paws. So you can probably tell which is which. And that really is what this book does. It invites the reader into the story to be the one that is the real detective. So they'll be noticing things that our super sleuths probably don't notice or don't notice immediately. Anyway, the mystery in the story is that Lady V arrives and there's a missing diamond warp drive. Now the pages are very busy, as you can see here, and there are lots of clues to be picked up on the pages, clues that our duo will probably miss. So here you can see them searching Lady V's house. You're invited to look for somebody or something that's playing hide and seek with them. So you have to look closely into these very busy images to find that. But this is what I really love is let me just go back. I love the fact that the engine is a real engine, you know, the detail in that. And I love the technical drawing aspects to this as well. There's so much in the detail here. Definitely a picture book for older readers. Maybe one that you'll enjoy solving the mystery yourself too. So the next picture book is called The New Friend. And the reason that I put this one in to the presentation is that it's a story from 2 points of view. And as such, it opens up the possibility for us to talk about with children how things can seem so very different to different characters, to different people. So May's story, the little girl, starts, I'm May, I live with my family. It might seem like any other day. And the boy's story starts, I'm Joe, I live with my dad. We just moved here. Everything is so different. And she goes on, But today is special. A new kid is in town. And he says, it's weird being the new kid in town. So you're getting the one narrative from 2 points of view. This works very well for most of the story. There's a little bit in the middle where I think it could just get a little bit confusing, where they're inhabiting the same play space, but in fact thinking very different thoughts. But you easily overcome that just with a little bit of conversation with the reader. And now for something completely different. This could almost go in the non-fiction section. It's a poetic narrative. It could go in the poetry section as well, actually. It's a poetic narrative that opens our eyes to the majesty of trees and encourages young readers to open their eyes, ears and minds to the potential of trees. It has a reflective voice, so this is how it sounds. What about trees that are yet to be born, sleeping safely under the grasses? What will become of those new little plants? Who will love them with each year that passes? When they grow up, what might they become? Will their cherries be picked in the spring? Or maybe their wood will be carefully carved into violins fitted with strings. There's a blurring here of the child and the author through the narration and illustration. When you read the author's note, you'll understand what I mean about the sort of blurring of the child who appears to be telling or asking these questions, and the author's idea for where the book came from. So she says, when I started a daily walk around where I live in Plymouth, every morning I took a cup of tea to a small patch of grass. I wanted to make sure I had time to relax before work. I live by the sea, where most people like to sit by the shore and listen to the waves, but I wanted to go somewhere quieter where I could read a book or write in my journal or watch the world go by. To begin with, I saw all the trees around me the same way, nothing special or unique. However, the more I visited, the more I noticed how each tree was different. The curve of a branch, the variety of colours, the way people interacted with them, using them for shade on sunny days and shelter when it rained. The more I noticed these trees, the more I started noticing every tree that I walked past. It made me think about trees as individuals. How long had they been there? What could they see from the tips of their branches? Soon I found myself asking bigger questions. How old is this tree? Does it think or feel like I do? I started taking photos of trees, researching their history and drawing them in my sketchbook. I even visited an ancient woodland that is spoken about in myths and legends. So a lot of the questions that are posed in the book are as much the author's as they are the little girl in the story. So quite a bumper collection of picture books there. And I'll move on now to the next section, which is young fiction. And I'm starting with a new book from Vivian French called The Wizard's Banquet, perfect for year 2, year 3 transition. The stories, as you can see, they've got a similar look to them, but they are individual stories rather than being part of a continuous series with the same characters. The thing that connects them is the fairy tale type of story that they are. And this one is about Pippin, and when he's forced to leave home and seek his fortune in the world, he stumbles upon a farm that needs a helpful boy who's very good at puzzles. So there's a sign at the farm, and he knocks on the door, and the wizard seems to be expecting him. The wizard is in need of an apprentice, and Pippin fulfills that role. So lovely stories, and if you haven't come across them, well worth getting hold of a set for year 2 stroke year 3. So another series, I have mentioned the Great Safari Rescue before. These are the Playdate adventurers, and this time the story is the Honeybee Treasure Hunt. So basically our 4 characters have to solve a mystery around the honeybees, and in order to do that they shrink down to honeybee size. It's a great adventure series, and again, one worth looking out for if you haven't come across it already. Indigo Wild. So this is the second adventure story from Pippa Kernick about this wonderful madcap place, Jellybean Crescent, which is full of magical creatures. And this book is so beautifully presented, high production values and in full colour. So I'm hoping that there are going to be a lot more in this series. All of those are great for young readers. On to some middle grade fiction. And my first story is Call Me Lion. This one is highly recommended. It's a very well told tale about a boy with selective mutism and a girl who hasn't learnt to read and write. The girl in the story, Risha, is new to the area. Her family have moved around because of her father's job, and nobody at school has really discovered that she can't read or write. She's been able to mask it. But they meet in the school holidays, and they both love to dance, and that cements their friendship. So this is a joint passion at which they both excel. Through this story, they learn to overcome their ordeals, and they learn that sometimes well-intentioned actions can feel like a betrayal. The story is told from Leo's point of view, the boy with the selective mutism, and it feels emotionally very authentic. There's an economical storytelling which allows the reader to focus on what's really important. And I thought a lovely depiction of family, particularly sibling relationships. There's a letter that Leo sends to Risha early in the story explaining his selective mutism, hoping that she will still want to be his friend. Of course, he doesn't know that she can't read, and although she has the letter, she hasn't actually read it. Anyway, it feels very natural to the plot and a perfect way to get the exposition into the story, which is needed really for the reader to be able to truly empathise with both characters. What sticks out for me in that letter is he says, the most important thing to tell you is I want to talk, but I can't talk. Anyway, a very moving and beautifully written story. On to something completely different. I was absolutely delighted that there is a new Diamond Brothers detective story from Anthony Horowitz. Of course, Anthony is extremely well known for the Alex Rider books and also for his TV writing. But for me, he's really at his best when he's being funny, and these are incredibly funny stories. The new book was written during lockdown, and part of it, the chapters were released free on the internet for children while they were at home. And Anthony completed the story with the intention of donating the royalties to charity, and they are going to a Suffolk charity to help families. If you know this series, you'll know that each of them makes a connection with a well-known film, The Falcon's Malteser, obviously the Maltese Falcon. And in this case, Where Seagulls Dare is that Alistair MacLean adventure story, Where Eagles Dare. I had great fun talking to Anthony a couple of weeks ago, and the podcast for this will be up very soon. It's really worth listening to because Anthony talks a lot about how humour works, and humour, as we know, is in some quarters underappreciated, so it's great to listen in to what he has to say there. Anyway, you can expect many of the things that happen in Where Eagles Dare, like thrilling cable car rides. You can expect all of that, plenty of puns, plenty of jokes, and a good chase at the end, which would fit into any James Bond movie. So yeah, look out for that. So Where the Storm Rages, of course, Phil Earle has had tremendous success with When the Sky Falls, and it's shortlisted for the Kate Greenaway, not the Kate Greenaway, sorry, the Carnegie this year. While the Storm Rages has many points of connection with When the Sky Falls, but it is a very different story. So the points of connection are animals in danger and set during the Blitz. But this story is much more of a classic adventure story than When the Sky Falls. So Noah, it's the eve of the declaration of war, and Noah is probably going to be sent away and evacuated. His father has already gone to the war to fight, and as his father leaves, he makes him promise that he'll look after the dog that both he and his father love dearly, called Win. And he tells Noah that as long as Win is safe, he knows that he'll be coming back to his family, and that he will be safe too. Noah really takes that to heart and believes the truth of it. So when the government announced that that pets are going to be scared by the Blitz, that there won't be any food for them, and that actually it's not kind to keep pets, and you won't have enough food to feed yourself, so you definitely won't have enough food to feed your pets. And they put in place a plan for the basically the extermination of the pets, and Noah is determined that that isn't going to happen to Win. So he finds himself a barge and gathers together, as you can see on the jacket of the book here, a collection of animals: birds, kittens, rabbits. There's even a python. There's a group of friends that go with him on the journey, where he basically is trying to find somewhere safe for these animals. So there is some hilarity in here, there's some comedy, but it's also an adventure story with lots of jeopardy, and it's going to keep you guessing to the last moment what actually is going to happen. And fantastic characterization, and you may well need a tissue or two if you're as soft as I am for reading this type of story. Anyway, another cracker from Phil Earle. The Midnighters. Well, I really enjoyed Hannah Tuke's The Unadoptables, and that was her debut book, and this is the second book from her. It's set in Prague, and it starts with an inauspicious birth. So our heroine is born on, she's the 12th child, and she's born on the 12th day of the 12th month, just as the clock strikes 12. She's born into a family of scientists and very gifted siblings, but she can't find what her scientific calling is. She thinks that it might be geology, or at least she makes that up because she feels as though she's a disappointment to her family. What she does have is intuitions, and intuitions for bad things that are going to happen. So the story really kicks off when her parents are going away on a scientific expedition, and she is sent to live with her uncle. And she notices in a house opposite to where her uncle lives, the bedroom facing onto her bedroom facing onto this house, she notices another girl, the girl with the Sylvie, her name is, with the long white hair hanging upside down like a bat. And the two strike up a friendship, always meeting at midnight in the city of Prague, close to the Charles Bridge. But one day Sylvie goes missing, and that takes our heroine off to search for the Midnight Guild. So it's a great fantasy full of secret societies, strange science that are going on, and a mystery to be solved. Prague is such a great setting for this story. So Onyeka and the Academy of the Sun. This is about a British Nigerian girl, Onyeka, who discovers that her curls have psychokinetic abilities. And there's a thrilling adventure that she undertakes with her newfound superhero friends. The inciting moment for this story happens in a swimming pool, and Onyeka is there with her friend Cheyenne, and a catastrophe happens. It's as though Cheyenne is going to drown, and it's at that point that Onyeka discovers the superpower that is present in her hair. Just as the water starts to slide down my throat, the bubble, this is the hair, solidifies around Cheyenne and me like a giant shield. For a moment, everything is still and strange and beautiful. Then, without warning, we start moving quickly towards the surface, pushed by the shield of hair. As my head clears the water, my hair melts away behind me like a dream, and an arm yanks me up. I gasp in some much-needed air, my chest heaving with the effort, and the water streams from my eyes and nose as we are hauled to the side of the pool. After this incident, her mother quickly whisks Onyeka off to the Academy of the Sun. That's a school in Nigeria where Solari, the children with these superpowers, are trained. So it's a thrilling adventure with a magical element to it. And put me in mind a little bit, although a very different story and for different ages, put me in mind a little bit of Yaba Baidu's Lionheart Girl. Those of you that have read that book will know that there's sort of magic in the touch of hair in that story. Now we have the fourth book from Steve Cole in this very moving series. This one is from Barrington Stokes, so dyslexia friendly, or just a general good short read. This time it's the fast fashion industry that comes under scrutiny, and this story is told from the point of view of Han, a young girl unwittingly sold into slavery by her illiterate parents. From her testimony, we learn about the cruelties of sweatshops, the disregard for life, and the intolerable working conditions, all in the name of producing fashionable, distressed jeans for a cheap price. Taking strength from Ho Chi Minh's words, when the prison door is opened, the real dragon will fly out. Han and her friends plan to escape, making a banner to fly from the windows of the factory. Things don't go to plan immediately, but there is a happy ending to this one. Peter Bunzel, this time writing for Barrington Stoke as well. This story is set in Russia at the time of Catherine the Great. An 11-year-old Sophie loves to play chess with her with her grandmaster father. One day he's summoned to St. Petersburg to teach Catherine's son, Prince Paul, to play chess. Now, he fails to teach the lazy and ungifted prince, so Catherine imprisons him in the dungeon. There's sadness in the story because Sophie's mother dies and she's left alone. And then a mysterious character comes into Sophie's life, and they have a mechanical chess player. It's the Clockwork Queen. And it looks as though these two characters, who are her father's friends, have a plan to rescue him. It's a really good story, again, short as Barrington Stoke stories are, but really well told. And the Clockwork Queen is based on the famous mechanical Turk. So I just put a picture up there, and you can see the cabinet into which Sophie will be able to hide herself in order to play against, well, her father, as it happens, playing for his release from prison. The Battle for Cable Street, sticking with Barrington Stoke here. It's a good month for stories from them. This one is the true story of the Battle of Cable Street, told from the perspective of 11-year-old Elsie, who's a young Jewish Irish girl. It sticks pretty accurately to the historical story. Some really great quotes in this that make you sit up and take notice of the things that are sort of happening today, I think. The quote on the screen shows that moment when people came out and did not allow Mosley and the Black Shirts to pass down Cable Street. It raises lots of important questions. So Elsie wonders what was in it for Mosley and Rothermere, who apparently appear to be championing the working British class people. What did they really want, she asks. And at the end of the story, she says, like housework, no matter how often you clean up, the dirt keeps coming back. A sort of reminder to us all to always be vigilant and not complacent. Non-fiction. So again, a good month for non-fiction, I think. So I will try to whiz through these books here. The first one is from Sean Taylor and Alex Morse, and it's the third book in their series from Happy Yak that are following the seasons, Winter Sleep, Busy Spring. Absolutely love this book. The illustration just perfectly captures the summer day. And what we have is a young girl here, again with a grandparent, learning about the natural world. So the first part of the story is a beautiful narrative. The grandfather points out all sorts of things that they notice on their walks. I love the fact that the butterflies are not just butterflies, but they're butterflies that you could recognize and could name. And then towards the end of the book, we have several spreads that are more factual and with information presented like this. A couple of books next from Little Tiger. Another thing that has come out this month tends to be about journeys and migrations. So the first two that I'm mentioning here, The Journey and Look to the Sky, are books for younger readers. The first one is all about the journey of the zebra, and the second one is really about the migration of the monarch butterflies. They both have cut through pages where you turn the pages and you can see the zebra or the monarch butterfly and the page behind. So here we have the text from The Journey. It's a rhyming story. On arid plains in soaring heat starts one of nature's greatest feats. Across the landscape, zebras stride as though they sense a running tide. And sorry, I didn't move on the pictures for you to have a look at, but there you can see the previous book. There's Journey and Look Up in the Skies, and there's the picture that goes with the text that I've just read, the rhyming story about the zebra. And if we move on, just to show you some of the other illustration, the beasts all stop, ears pricked alert, as something skulks beneath the dirt. They rush and swim, they cannot rest, for this is nature's greatest test. And then another journey book, which I think is really one of my top picks for this month for non-fiction, Narwhal the Arctic Unicorn. This is the second book from Justin Anderson, who previously wrote a book about the snow leopard. It's illustrated by Joe Weaver. Justin Anderson is a wildlife documentary maker and adventure documentary maker. He was responsible for the mountain segment of Planet Earth 2, wrote the script for that, and out of that came the snow leopard story. So the Arctic Unicorn, I think he really shows us the narwhal perhaps as we've never seen it before, because they're very difficult actually to see under the water. And I had, for one, had always thought of narwhals as being solitary characters or solitary creatures. But in fact, they normally swim in pods of 20, and when they're migrating through the cracks in the ice, they may be up to 100 narwhal, which is obviously quite a splendid feat. Absolutely gorgeous illustration and wonderful lyrical text for this as well. So last month I had one of Polly Faber's books, and Klaus Farlan, Building a Home, this time special delivery, which is all about the journey of a book as it's printed and on its journey to the bookshop. What makes this, it's a really good marriage of text and image. Just to give you an idea here, Mac and his reach stacker move containers inside a warehouse to be unpacked. And there's a lot of this from Polly, you know, Mac and his reach stacker. She's really not just given them any old name, but thought about the rhythm and the sounds of the text. And the graphic style just really pops and just makes this a really pleasurable book to read. Also from Nosy Crow, the second book in the series, you might remember How to Be a Vet. This one, How to Be a Doctor, is another clearly presented title. The strengths in this book are the depth of the information that goes well beyond the usual people who help us type book. Here we learn about the qualities and academic subjects that are needed to be a good doctor, and connections are also made with activities that children can do to find out if they are going to be well suited to this profession, such as volunteering in a care home or watching science documentaries. Many different kinds of doctor are featured, along with other key workers, porters, receptionists, phlebotomists, nurses, and emergency services. Also, the role of research scientists is considered, and their role in securing world health. There's no glossary, but as all the specialist words are explained in context, then really that would be superfluous. So, lovely series. There's just a spread so you can see what it looks like inside. Okay, so I'm going to try and whiz on a little bit faster. Before music is all about musical instruments and where they come from. Music doesn't come out of nothing. It always starts somewhere with something, with someone. This delightful book tells the story of musical instruments. It's divided into sections covering stone, found objects, clay, goods, different kinds of strings, metal, wood, reeds and leather, and also singing. Each section opens with a narrative showing the early invention of an instrument, and it's accompanied by onomatopoeic sound. The text then moves on to detail the different types of instrument that have been made using that specific material. And there are lots of connections made to different cultures around the world. So that's what the illustration looks like, and the density of the text. It's both an informative read and an aesthetic experience. Just going to mention Everything You Know About Mini Beasts is Wrong by Nick Crompton, and it follows on the popular book Everything You Know About Dinosaurs is Wrong. It has the same format. It's engaging non-fiction, which takes some common misconceptions and explodes them. For instance, bees do not always die when they sting. Insects don't always lay eggs. Some insects, like the Pacific giant cockroach beetles, have eggs that hatch inside them. And while cockroaches are great survivors, they certainly are not indestructible. I found some of the suppositions more convincing than others. Some of them seem to have been created for the purpose of having enough material for the book, but I suppose that is dependent to some extent on the reader's prior knowledge. The glossary was well constructed and clearly written, so again, another good book from Nick Crompton. On to Spies. David Long, who we know from Survivors and Heroes, has produced a fine non-fiction collection about spies. And although this book is organised into chapters about different spies, it transcends, I think, the usual short biographical approach by grouping the spies in question around themes. We learn not only about the courage of individuals, but the different contexts in which they were placed. Roald Dahl spying on the Americans and providing Churchill with intelligence so that he could exert pressure on the US to end the war. Long has the opportunity to share his enthusiasm for the hardware, giving us details about the different planes that we use for different types of mission. It's informative and well written. The next section really seems to feature a lot of biographies, which were also something of a theme this month. Ada Lovelace is going into paperback. It was previously available in hardback. So we know that Ada Lovelace was a rebellious, rule breaker and maths whiz kid. These books are marketed for Key Stage 1, but actually I think probably lower Key Stage 2 is closer for most children. Just so you can have a look at some of the internal spreads, really nicely presented. We get the family tree of Ada Lovelace and her connections. Charles Babbage is there. I like the little touch of the cat, adding a bit of humour. And then the text is presented as a time, almost like a timeline, so key dates, and then the text is written in present tense, but there's a lot going on in the illustration. And then at the end of the book, the end letter gives us more text like that. So another biographical series that I really liked this month, this series, Little Guides to Great Lives. Again, probably been marketed at Key Stage 1, but I think it's really older than that. I'll just show you some of the spreads from the internals of the Anne Frank book. There you can see the annex and how that's presented. Very readable and really clearly laid out. That's a really nice series. My last, I think it's my last biography, is Gaudi. This is a straightforward story about the artist and architect Gaudi. It starts from his childhood years, very colourful, explains about his family, how they were all metal workers, about his own mobility issues and how he felt very different from other people in his family, being a blonde-haired Spaniard, and then takes us through his life history, his interest in architecture, but really importantly his observation of nature and recognising that nature doesn't deal in straight lines, nature deals in curves, and how this really was the beginning of the inspiration for his architecture. Also talks a little bit about his love of broken things and broken china and mosaic making. I wanted to mention a wonderful encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of STEM Words, which I've got a copy of here in front of me. Some of you may know that at Just Imagine we've been doing a lot of school-based research on reading and writing in science. And one of the sections of that work deals with scientific vocabulary. If anybody is doing that training, you'll know that it's multifaceted and multi-layered. But one of the issues for reading science is often around the nominalisation of complex scientific processes. So things like, for instance, if we look at the next slide, adaptation, photosynthesis, echolocation, diffraction. These are all nouns that we give to complex processes. And a glossary, a short glossary, often won't give you much help because you have to experience it. And what I really love about this book is that it will certainly help, and it's a really good reference to have because of the wonderful logographic type presentation that we have here. On its own, you know, these words have to be visited and revisited for us to get those deeper understandings of them, but much better than just a dictionary or just a glossary in a book is a really good resource to have to hand. Okay, having to rush very quickly now. The Big Book of Questions is a reissue of a philosophical book by Stephen Law. I love the fact that it says, you know, I don't know the answers to many of these questions. Some I might, but I'm not really sure. And the questions in this book can support philosophical inquiry in the classroom and give children the confidence to ask really big questions too. So, moving on. Last couple of books now. I wanted to put this one in because I think it's just so important, talking about Islamophobia, what it is and how we can challenge it. A book for teenagers, but I've also put it in here because I think it's a great book for teachers and parents and librarians to read for themselves, as well as recommending to teens. It's set out in the following chapters. Why do we need to talk about Islamophobia? What is Islam? What is religious intolerance and discrimination? Where does it come from? Who's affected by it? What about structural Islamophobia? How do anti-terror laws affect Muslims? What are hate crimes? What role does the media play? And how practically do we challenge discrimination and prejudice? So, written by Sabina Akhtar and Naima B. Robert, an important book for all of us. Excuse me. So the last section is poetry, and I've only got one book in the poetry section this evening, and that is this wonderful collection, Ready for Spaghetti, funny poems for funny kids, and it is for very young children and their adults. Here's a little poem you might remember, illustrated by Polly Dunbar, who is also the illustrator of this collection, by Michael Rosen. Michael Rosen is at his most playful with this collection, and the rhymes are perfect for reading out loud and for informal performance. And as we know, parents and early years practitioners do very well at this when they really allow themselves to get fully immersed in the playfulness. Many of the rhymes have onomatopoeic and alliterative qualities which invite playfulness and inventiveness, the kind of inventiveness that young children do naturally with words. Let me just give you a flavour here. Here come my floppy shoes, flip, flap, flappity, flap. Here come my clippy shoes, trip, trap, trippity, trap. Here come my clappy hands, clip, clap, clappity, clap. Here come my slappy hands, slip, slap, slappity, slap. Here comes an egg for me, tip, tap, tappity, tap. Here comes some sleep for me, nip, nap, nappity, nap. Polly Dunbar's illustrations are absolutely divine. The style is a little bit looser to her normal style, and there are even some pictures in here that were drawn by her son. Her children are always beautifully observed in a style that's instantly recognisable, but in this case I think they really capture, the images capture the vitality of a sketchbook. There are 4 children that you can see on the front cover, and those 4 children form a sort of narrative as you go through the rhymes. Very, very highly recommended. And the very last poem in the book, of course, is about bedtime, and it's the first time that we see the parents, so the children have gone on their day, and we get to the nighttime poem at the end. And this is the end of this month's book blast. So thank you so much for joining me. And if you would like to enter the competition, just one question this evening. You need to email your answer if you want to participate to assistant@justimagine.co.uk. And this is to win all of the books that I've mentioned in tonight's presentation, or to be one of our runners-up. And as I said, we gave away over £1,000 worth of books last month. So the question is, in the Upside Down Detective, what are the names of the 2 sloth characters? And that's it. So if you send an email to assistant@justimagine.co.uk with your answer to that question, so that is, what are the 2 sloth characters in Upside Down Detectives called? I just need their 2 names. Just make sure that along with your answer, you send your name and address where you would like the book sent if you are one of our winners, and we'll contact you by email to let you know if you've won. It's the first time that we've tried it this way with a live stream, so I'll be checking to see if it works well and if we get lots of entries to the competition. And just so that you know, the competition closes on Wednesday, so that's Wednesday the 8th of June at 8 o'clock in the evening. So you've got until Wednesday the 8th of June at 8 o'clock to answer. A little bit longer than usual today, so thank you if you managed to stick with me. Thank you for joining me, and I will let you know when July's Book Blast links go live. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.